I can. Welcome to A Shadow Post. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Can you let us know in the community about yourself?
Sure. My name is Ken Russell. I'm a City of Miami Commissioner, and I'm running for United States Congress, House of Representatives, District 27 here in South Florida.
Great. And how long you been commissioner?
So I've only been in local government now 7 years. I'm just finishing my second term. I'm seeking federal office. I really want to fix some of the things that I wasn't able to do at the city level without federal help, mostly around clean water and housing issues. 7 years.
Great. Can you tell us about your background, your nationality?
Sure, so I'm Japanese American. I'm Miami's first ever Japanese American elected official.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And if and when elected into Congress, I'll be the first Japanese American elected official in South Florida's history as well at the federal level. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Can you get more into details about your history?
Sure. My mother's Japanese, 100%. She came from Japan back in the 1960s when she met my dad. He was from Kentucky, he's Irish American, and he was doing business in Japan in the yo-yo industry, and that's how he met my mother. She was a yo-yo player. So they traveled the world together and they settled in Miami.
Great. And then from there on, what you started a business? Is that what you were saying before?
Yeah, so my dad had a patent on how to make the yo-yo, the original toy from the Philippines. He had a new patent on how to mass produce it. And so he had a very successful company around this that he worked together with Coca-Cola and sold millions of yo-yos around the world. When I got out of college, I went to business school. I wanted to join and grow and help his company. So my brother and I both joined the family company for about 10 years, and I sold about 20 million yo-yos in 55 countries.
Wow, that's amazing. After that, what was your next step?
Well, I really enjoyed international travel. I did go to university in Japan for 1 year. I minored in Japanese, and I did a lot of business in Japan also while I was selling yo-yos. But I realized I wanted to form my own company. The family company was very successful, but I wanted to do something that was mine. And so I started a water sports company, mostly around kite surfing, and stand-up paddleboarding. I started as an instructor in the ocean, where I found a love of the environment. Then I became a retailer, then a wholesaler, and in the end I had a distribution company selling millions of dollars worth of stand-up paddleboards and surfboards every year in the United States, Canada, Central and South America.
So during that time in progress, you learned a lot for owning a business?
Yes, I mean, very unique businesses, both of them. In the yo-yo world, for example, you learn public speaking because you're teaching kids how to play yo-yo. There's 300 kids in front of you and you have to speak Korean. Jalan Boranji. No, I'm sorry, that's Indonesian. I get all my countries mixed up. Inu no Sampo, Japanese. You learn to teach the kids, but you learn public speaking in front of large crowds. Then you learn sales, right, from being in the business side. Then you learn law because you're negotiating contracts. And ironically, even though I'd never been in the political world before, everything that I learned in business and international travel kind of prepared me for this world.
That makes sense. And then the next step of your career?
So I was running my water sports business. I have 3 children. My wife is a veterinarian. My children, our dogs, my family, we all played at a park in front of my house, a city park, right in front of our house called Merry Christmas. It was the name of the park. And one day it closed. Nobody told us why, but a big fence went around it. And I learned that it was contaminated. They had discovered toxic chemicals in the park. And so obviously I was worried for my children. I was worried for my home value. I started investigating, asking questions, and learning the science of contamination. Politics, I had no idea who was making these decisions, but they were really bad decisions. Their idea of how to clean up the park was very bad. Their idea of how to pay for it was very bad. And I decided to mobilize my neighborhood. So I organized my neighborhood, just like a community environmental activist. And several hundred of my neighbors got together. We went to City Hall, and we got them to change their plan. We cleaned up the park together. And I really love that process of civic engagement. It opened my eyes to what was wrong in local government. and I decided to run for office.
Okay, great. What did you do a lot of during you being in as now being in the government? Was there a lot of changes that you've done when you're on?
Yes, and that's something I always like to stress to people when they hear a politician talk.
Right.
You'll hear them talk about, I fight for this, I believe in this. The question you should ask them is, what have you done?
Right.
And that's what you're asking me now. I'm very proud of my accomplishments in the city. Even though I didn't have a legal background or a political background, I've passed some of the strongest environmental laws in our state with regard to toxic chemicals and dumping into our waters. All these fish kills you see in the news, the manatees dying, this is all about how we treat our water. And it's not just environmental, because when the water quality is bad, our economic quality is bad. It affects jobs at the highest and lowest levels. When a red tide kills the fish on the west coast and they all wash up on the beach, all those hotels lose their business and shut down for the summer. Everyone who works in those hotels loses their jobs as well. And so I've turned the environmental discussion into an economic discussion. And through that, I've been able to pass laws in the city of Miami around fertilizer, around glyphosate and Roundup, around styrofoam, also how development, when they're building buildings and they don't control their chemicals and their cement and it goes out into the bay, these things all have an effect. And so I've written some of the state's strongest laws on this. I've also really gotten into climate change issues and written laws for the city of Miami around that as well.
Great. So now you're going to your next step and running for a higher level, right? And what made you decide to do that?
Well, when I came into office, it was very important that I bring my culture with me. There is not a very large Japanese American population in Florida, and certainly not Miami, and there had never been a Japanese American commissioner. So from the time I was elected, even my swearing-in ceremony, I had a koto player there, a Japanese flute player. We had ikebana arrangements of flowers. I really wanted my fellow elected officials to see how important it was for me to bring my culture into office here. And I also passed several ordinances and created holidays around important Japanese American figures to really elevate that within our culture. I started seeing a lot of discrimination during the time of the pandemic. Even before that, you could even say even previous to Biden, when Trump was in office, there was an anti-Muslim sentiment. And so I passed resolutions in the city of Miami protecting Muslim Americans against hate crimes and hate speech. And I did the same for Asian Americans when the pandemic hit. I started seeing these federal issues that weren't being protected, basic civil rights that we thought were already protected. We started to lose them from a political perspective. So I realized I needed to get involved at a higher level with a louder voice to represent my community. But I also found that there were many things I wanted to do at the city that I couldn't do without the federal help. Big infrastructure, storm surge, sea level rise, roadworks, big projects. And I don't want to tax my residents further. So I realized I didn't have a partner at the federal level to help me with those things. So I wanted to become a federal representative, a congressperson that I wish I had. And not just for a City of Miami commissioner, but for all 412 cities in Florida. I want to represent them in Washington for not only the things we care about diversity, inclusivity, and basic civil rights, but also infrastructure and housing and the things that are missing at the federal level.
Okay. And how are you going to be able to tackle this?
So first I have to get elected,
Right.
but I've been able to tackle these things even at the local level before getting elected. And so I know I'll be effective once I get in there. There are very simple changes to federal law that need to happen in order for us to have better water quality, for example. And I'm able to do that once elected. So, you know, I have a tough race. I'm in a primary right now in August 23rd. And when successful there, I go on to the general election on November 8th.
And right now, what are you doing, or the tools to get the word out there for you?
So I've embraced technology. I was just named South Florida's best TikToker.
I was about to say that.
And not even just for politics. They named me best TikToker amongst artists, musicians, comedians, whatever. And I have about 350,000 followers on TikTok over this past year while running for office. because I'm engaging with youth and I'm not being overly serious. I'm really trying to speak as a human, and it's connecting. It's very interesting how this app works, and that's created a huge following. But I also have to do the traditional campaigning. We're knocking on over 150,000 doors between now and November 8th. We're raising money like crazy. I was the highest fundraiser in this race. This last quarter, we raised over $500,000, which I was very proud of. And we have an amazing team that's helping me. We're visiting churches, we're visiting homeowners associations. I'm traveling and knocking doors, going to environmental events and talking with folks that care about these issues. So with a little bit of luck and a few votes, I'll be your congressman in a few months.
What are the hurdles that you had in the past being elected? That I know this is your second term as a commissioner. What do you see that maybe in this interview could help you get your message?
Well, I have more of a message for your viewers and your listeners and your readers that even as they might think, okay, this is a Hispanic-dominated society, an Anglo-dominated society in Florida. How could an Asian American get elected to a position of importance? And it's not true. It's not true. What you have here in Florida, especially because of the influx of Cuban, Puerto Rican, Colombian, there is an embracing of diversity. And what you'll find is that if you are not only talking about one ethnic niche or country background, they recognize you for your embracing of diversity. And that's what's wanted and needed right now in our government. And understanding that just because someone doesn't look like me doesn't make them the enemy. And I think there's a lot of support for that. So first thing is, if someone who is Asian American is interested in running for office, whether local or federal, it's possible. I had no support. Nobody knew my name. I had no political background. And I ran in a very important district here in the city of Miami as an underdog. I had raised maybe $100,000, and I was running against someone who had $1.6 million for a city council seat, because it's downtown Miami, Brickell, Coconut, it's all the development of Miami. And it was a very important development scene. But just knocking on doors and listening to people is if you connect with them and they put their trust in you, you have a really good chance.
Okay.
And so that's the basic message, really just don't let these ceilings, these walls limit you.
Like a bamboo ceiling, like they said, right? That type of that's pretty good. Now, when you say you get elected, right? What are the first steps that you're going to do in that position?
Well, it's a very, very divided time right now in politics. I think people are really sick of it. Even though I'm a Democrat, you don't hear me campaign about Donald Trump or January 6th. I talk about our issues, the things we care about, housing issues, environmental issues, jobs. I worked hard on $15 and $18 an hour legislation. I'm really in support of people who have organized representation in labor, especially within the janitorial community, the security community, hospitality community. I've been endorsed by all of those labor unions. And so it's really about coalescing our community once I get into office to recognize that I'm not going to perpetuate the fight of division. It's about what solutions we can bring, and so really it's about building those relationships to get things done.
Right. Can you tell us a story of at the time when you had a little difficulty or pushback, and what's your solution to that in the past?
So the city of Miami is one of the most difficult political environments in the country. It's the largest city with only 5 city commissioners in the country, and so it's a little bit too much power to put in a very few people that control a $1.3 billion budget. Politically, I've always been in the minority, caring about environmental issues, progressive issues, labor issues. But I've been able to figure out how to get my votes, to get my initiatives passed. But it's been very difficult. Probably the most difficult time I had was when I called for the removal of our city attorney. And it was quite dramatic. The city attorney is a very strong position, manages an office of over 20 attorneys in the city. and I felt that her actions were incorrect and unethical as her client, and I called for her removal. The other commissioners like her very much, and so when I brought them the evidence of the wrongdoing, I thought that was sufficient. But what I didn't realize that position is also a political position. Even though she's not elected, she survives on the votes of the commission, and so she only is removed not because of evidence, but because 4 commissioners decide. And this put me at odds with my own commission and obviously with the city attorney's office. The bad news, or at least the part that was toughest, she was not removed. So I've had to work with her now for 7 years after trying to fire her. The good news is that department doesn't do what they did before anymore. But that was a pretty dark time. It was really hard. And now I have a much better sense of communication with the different departments in the administration of the city. I feel there's much more transparency, and they follow the rules.
Great. What do you feel about the veterans here in the United States? What's your take on it?
Yeah, so my father was in the Air Force. He was an instructor pilot. And so I always had a great deal of respect for those who have served in the military. Most important thing for me is that the military is respected not just when they're in service, but when they return. And I think that's where we lose them. We lose the ability or the willingness to take care of them in an organized way, whether through the VA, whether through people that become homeless, post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health issues, drug abuse issues. Veterans feel these greater than the average population. We're very proud in the city of Miami to have reached a functional 0 veteran homelessness. And what that means is, it doesn't mean you'll never see a homeless veteran. It means that there is an opportunity and a path for every veteran who is homeless to get off the street and into an entire system of care. I'd like to see that mentality that philosophy go beyond into the federal government with regard to how veterans are taken care of at the medical level. And that has to do with presumption of illness. A veteran shouldn't have to fight after coming back from overseas and living near a burn pit that their cancer may have been caused by that burn pit. The level of scrutiny should be less. The burden of proof should be less, because they served their country without choice. Once they got there, they were told where to live, and if they were exposed to toxic chemicals, they shouldn't have to prove that their cancer came from those toxic chemicals, or at least the burden of proof should be less than a typical lawsuit, for example. So things like that. It's really a shame, and I think that our general public believe and support veterans in that. They just don't know what to do.
Great. I have a last question for you. For the viewers and the listeners, where they can reach you if they want to get a hold of you.
Thank you for asking. So if you go to kenrussellforflorida.com, you can learn all about the positions that I've fought for, what I believe in, and what I've achieved here in the city. You can also learn how to support my campaign if you want to be a volunteer, or if you want to contribute, or just if you want to vote. The people voting in my election are in District 27, which is from Miami down to Cutler Bay and west to Kendall. It's a very specific area bordered by the Turnpike and the 836 all the way to the water. So it's Key Biscayne, Coral Gables, South Miami, Pinecrest, Cutler Bay, Palmetto Bay, Kendall, Richmond Heights. It's a great, beautiful district. You can also find me on all of the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and of course TikTok at Ken Russell for Florida, or Ken for Florida.
Thank you so much, Ken, and we look forward to covering you in the future.
Thank you for sending the message and doing this work. The Asian American community really needs a good medium to hear about what's going on in the community, and thank you for doing this.